Intensifying situation between Israel and Gaza. Let's go live now to former Israeli Defense Minister Father.The Bennett joins me live on the line. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Bennett. We have limited time. I don't want to go into the whole who's to blame. It's a conversation that's been had a million times, and it's a circular conversation, I feel. So I'd rather start by talking about the death toll. It's rising on both sides. Does Israel have a plan to bring this conflict to an end?
Our plan is to take down any Hamas operator, commander, and command center, because last Monday, unprovoked, Hamas started shooting rockets on Israel. They decided when this round would start. Israel will decide when it ends.
The problem with that, it appears that Israel's attacks on Hamas targets is also resulting, as well as the death of members of Hamas, it's resulting in the death of civilians. I understand Israel considers Hamas terrorists. It surely doesn't consider Palestinian civilians terrorists. So how does it argue that any civilian death is acceptable?
No civilian death is acceptable, and that's why we abhor the fact that Hamas uses civilians as human shields. 9 Israeli civilians were murdered over the past week by this unprovoked attack, and we're not going to sit back and just let Hamas decide when to start, when to end, at its convenience.
Does that mean that the civilians are considered collateral damage to Israel?
No, it means that Hamas is murdering its own people by hiding cowardly behind the civilians, by hiding its command centers within buildings that belong to hospitals or schools. This is a cynical way of operating, and they hold direct responsibility to all the deaths. And as I said, 9 Israelis were killed by Hamas.
I completely understand the point you're making. There have been Israeli deaths, there have been Palestinian deaths. You consider Hamas terrorists, though. If you say that you're going to accept civilian deaths, though, to kill Hamas terrorists in your eyes, is that not lowering yourself to the level of terrorists? Is 5 Hamas terrorists, 2 civilian deaths, an acceptable result to you?
You know, as I said, Israelis are being murdered day in, day out by Hamas. And fortunately, we have developed a defense system called Iron Dome, which protects our people. The Hamas can also develop an Iron Dome. It's very simple. Unarm yourself, stop attacking Israel, stop trying to annihilate us, and then there will be total peace in Gaza.
The world is looking on now on what is happening. There have been a lot of demonstrations, particularly in Europe. The fact that there have been a lot more Palestinian deaths than Israeli, is that making Israel look bad, do you think, in the eyes of the global public?
So you think more Jews should die? How many Jews should die for the world to feel that this is acceptable?
No, I'm asking you about public perception. Do you think that this is making Israel look bad purely in terms of the numbers?
Look, I'm not out to seem to look nice or unnice. I'm out to defend my people from an unprovoked attack. The days that we're going to sit back and allow murderous terror groups shoot and kill Jews, those days are over. And if the numbers seem slanted, all it means is that Israel cares more about its own people than Hamas about killing all people. Israel is defending itself. Hamas is out to kill Israelis. And by the way, they killed over 20 Gaza citizens by direct hits of their own rockets. If they use their resources to build schools, hospitals, to build a future for their children, there'll be peace. If they continue building more and more terror bases, this will go on for a while.
Israeli troops are on the border with Gaza. Why are they there?
For any need, for example, to defend ourselves against potential infiltration of terrorists into Israel and vice versa. We have all options on the table at all times.
But Israel's got tanks and troops there, surely not expecting an invasion from the Gaza Strip.
If there were, would I tell you?
But surely Israel has vastly superior numbers and vastly superior military capability, hence the disproportionate number of deaths. Surely that's not a realistic anticipation.
Again, you're talking about disproportionality. Let me show you something. This rocket over here landed this morning in a home in Sderot next to the bed of a 9-year-old child. This real thing landed. What is proportional? If this landed at your own family's home and killed your own family, what is proportional? Not one Israeli should die because of unprovoked Hamas attacks. That's proportional. If they want to stop this, they can stop and disarm themselves, stop fighting Israel, and there'll be peace, period.
I completely understand the point you're making. You're talking about stopping this, but with the mentality that you're explaining and the mentality of Hamas, neither side is going to give up. Neither side thinks they're in the wrong. This will continue, an eye for an eye. Everybody will end up blind or dead the way this is going. Benjamin Netanyahu has said that this will continue, the hostility will continue for as long as necessary. How can you see an end with that mentality from both sides, that they blame the other side, they think they're morally right?
No. This moral equivalence that you're suggesting is utterly wrong. Last Monday, out of nowhere, Hamas started shooting rockets at Jerusalem and across Israel. That's the fact, and you know that. So there's no equivalence, no symmetry. They started shooting rockets on Israel. We did not shoot rockets on Hamas. But if they think that they'll decide the moment that it starts, but also decide the moment it ends, they're wrong. When you attack Israel, you should know that we will decide when it ends. And it'll end when Hamas and its facilities and its commanders are neutralized.
Mr. Bennett, I greatly appreciate you coming on RT. Thank you so much for your time. Father.The Bennett is my guest, former Israeli spokesperson, told RT it's Hamas that triggered the violence in Israel, simply trying to protect its people.
Gaza is not under siege at all, at all. It's a security blockade. We have nothing, no interest in the Strip, really. Think about it, not a holy place, a tiny place, Gaza. We want to live in peace, but in the Strip there is Hamas, a terror organization affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood, and they disagree to have Israel, the tiny, only Jewish state on earth. And from time to time, they launch many missiles on the neighboring settlements. And now it's an escalation. About the ground forces, we have to consider it, because you have to think what will be next. If you ask me, I don't think that we will see Israeli troops in Gaza. I think that our Air Force is trying to do the best, not to harm the population, but to harm the stockpiles, etc. But let you know that the Hamas used the population as a human shield. But I want to say something about the casualties, okay? I saw in the international TV, they always try to look at it like a football or basketball match. There's just 7 casualties in Israel and 84 in the Palestinian area. And I think it's not fair, okay? Because the Israelis are trying to protect the civilians. In every house, we have a new house, we have a shelter, like in my house. We try to protect our civilians, and they deliberately put them in danger.